There's something strange happening in gaming right now, and if you've been playing RPGs for the last 15 years, you can probably feel it. We feel a mix of nostalgia and frustration, hope and betrayal.
You didn't betray me. You betrayed yourself.
All centered around two studios that don't even make the same kind of games, Bethesda and FromSoftware. One used to symbolize immersive worlds that swallowed you whole, and the other now carries that same torch, building games that assume you want to be challenged instead of coddled.
The worst thing you can do for your immune system is to coddle it. They need to fight their own battles.
At some point when nobody was paying attention, the fire passed from one studio to the other. To understand why this happened, we need to go back to when Bethesda built entire worlds and universes with their games. Ancient universes in different universes, alive in ways that felt almost hostile to your presence. These worlds didn't care about your character build, your quest log, your schedule, or your need for emotional validation.
Emotional, damn it!
You weren't a consumer in these spaces. You were an explorer. The Golden Run began with Morrowind, which serves as the perfect case study for what old Bethesda represented. Vardenfell had no quest markers, no GPS arrows, no glowing trails leading you by the nose. Quest directions came from NPCs who spoke like actual residents of the world, not tutorial systems. Go north from Balmora until you reach a fork, then take the path near the rocks. Which rocks? Good question. All of them look the same. You probably got lost, and the game expected you to figure it out.
And the seaweed with 2 leaves on it, 10,000 paces east.
But, Mr. Krabs, that seaweed has...
Morrowind handed you a knife and dropped you in a swamp. And we loved it because the design assumed we had functioning brains. Oblivion came next. Oblivion refined the formula without killing what made it special. Quest markers appeared, sure, but the core philosophy stayed intact. Cyrodiil felt weird and whimsical, packed with factions that seemed to exist long before you showed up. Think about the Oblivion Dark Brotherhood questline. Dark Brotherhood delivered storytelling where methods mattered, improvisation felt natural, and membership in something secret actually meant something. The Shivering Isles expansion proved Bethesda could still tap into genuine creativity when they wanted to, and the whole game carried this intangible vibe somewhere between high fantasy and fever dream that modern open worlds don't even try to capture anymore. Then Fallout 3 arrived in 2008 and perfected Bethesda's atmospheric design. Emerging from Vault 101 was a cinematic spectacle, but it was also a mission statement, delivered without words. The world is dead, the rules are unclear, and nobody's going to explain what all these skeletons are doing here. Environmental storytelling became the language Fallout 3 spoke best. Terminals full of doomed messages, holotapes from people who didn't make it, burned out suburbs frozen at the exact moment nuclear fire swept over them. You didn't need narrated cutscenes when the ruins of America were doing all the talking, and this became Bethesda's true identity, mystery delivered through space instead of dialogue. New Vegas followed. Developed by Obsidian but running on Bethesda's toolset and world-building philosophy. What New Vegas managed was remarkable. It took Fallout 3's atmospheric immersion and injected it with old-school RPG depth. Factions mattered in ways that went beyond simple reputation bars. Choices refused to point toward good or evil, and storylines rejected moral clarity as a design principle. People still argue about Caesar's Legion online. No, not that one, which tells you everything you need to know about the quality of that world. New Vegas stands as proof that when you hand skilled RPG writers a sandbox built for immersion, something rare emerges. A game that respects your intelligence. At this point in history, Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3, New Vegas, Bethesda represented something unique in AAA gaming. Not spectacle for its own sake, not retention funnels, not theme park design where every attraction gets marked on your map. What they offered was immersion through mystery, worlds that refused to explain themselves completely. Skyrim arrived and everything changed, though not in the way you'd expect.
Dragonborn.
Skyrim sits at the crossroads between eras, undeniably part of the Golden Age, but also marking the beginning of something different. The game became mainstream, not because it dumbed anything down, but because it struck this perfect balance between accessibility and immersion. The music, the atmosphere, the dragons, the snowy peaks, Skyrim connected emotionally with millions of players who'd never touched a Bethesda game before. What shifted was subtle but noticeable. Systems got simplified, RPG elements streamlined, dialogue shortened, discovery became more guided. These changes didn't ruin Skyrim, which remains a great game, but they signaled that Bethesda was starting to prioritize broad appeal over deep simulation. Fallout 4 came next, and this is where we started noticing the philosophical shift. Fallout 4 is a great game by most measures. The gunplay is the best the series ever had. The world density impresses, and the crafting systems work well. What changed was everything else. Dialogue skill checks vanished, a voiced protagonist appeared, and the dialogue wheel got restructured into something resembling Mass Effect, without the nuance that made Mass Effect work. Exploration remained strong, but the role-playing got thinner, and even though Bethesda's magic hadn't disappeared completely, we could feel the edges softening. The real decline didn't start with Skyrim or Fallout 4 though, both of which remain great games. What killed old Bethesda started after 2015, when gaming itself fundamentally changed. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. Bethesda didn't get weaker in isolation. They got weaker because the audience transformed around them. Back in 2010, gaming was still niche. Only about 25% of people with internet access played games regularly, and most of them were enthusiasts who wanted immersion, complexity, lore, and systems worth studying. By 2025, that number jumped past 60%. When more than half the internet plays games, the average player stops being a gamer and becomes just a person looking for entertainment between other tasks. Mainstream entertainment demands different things than hobbyist entertainment. Smoothness over friction, convenience over challenge, tutorials that explain everything, quest markers that eliminate error, combat that doesn't require build knowledge, maps that look like UI dashboards, and storylines that don't send you to wikis for basic comprehension. Bethesda stopped designing for gamers and started designing for the average consumer, someone who treats games the way they treat Netflix, something to relax with instead of wrestle against. Once you understand this shift, the entire timeline makes sense. Quest markers became more aggressive because players didn't want to get lost. Dialogue got simpler because reading felt like work. Systems got streamlined because complexity scared people away. And monetization crept in because the new audience expected free-to-play mechanics. When 61% of the world plays games, you're not designing for the player who wants to study faction politics. You're designing for the player who wants to unwind after work. That's how we got Fallout 76, which wasn't just a multiplayer experiment, but a philosophical pivot. Live service design, cosmetic monetization, seasonal loops, curated exploration, and a world built around retention metrics instead of roleplay. The backlash had nothing to do with the absence of NPCs at launch, and everything to do with the absence of identity. Fallout 76 marked the moment Bethesda stopped feeling like the studio that trusted us, and started feeling like the studio that catered to mass market expectations. Starfield arrived and became a fascinating Rorschach test. People who wanted a content library loved it. People who wanted a coherent simulated world felt disappointed. Starfield is massive, but modular, ambitious in a mechanical way, but with absolutely no depth. The game contains 1,000 pieces of content, but lacks a world with a singular heartbeat, and that's the fundamental problem. Old Bethesda built worlds, modern Bethesda builds content. The real collapse of Bethesda's identity happened in 2024 and 2025, and it didn't come from new games, but from updates to old ones. Fallout 4 got its next-gen update in 2024, and it got its Anniversary Edition update in 2025. both dropping during the Fallout TV show hype when millions of new casual viewers were discovering the franchise. Instead of using that moment to remind everyone why Bethesda's worlds mattered, the updates broke modding, introduced new monetization, and alienated the diehards who'd kept these games alive for over a decade. The fanbase split in this surreal way. New mainstream fans enjoyed the TV show as mindless entertainment. Old fans watched Bethesda break their mod lists for the fourth time, and the studio shipped updates that felt designed for neither group. This created the cultural tension you see today. We missed the era when Bethesda treated us like participants. Newer fans treat Fallout like Marvel. Fun to watch, easy to consume, not necessarily deep. This is how Bethesda went from defining immersion to defining safe, open-world entertainment. But here's the thing though, the magic didn't die, it simply moved. While Bethesda broadened and softened, FromSoftware hardened and deepened. FromSoftware did something radical by refusing to design for the mainstream. They refused to smooth edges, refused to hold hands, refused to compromise on difficulty, ambiguity, or narrative restraint. The rise of passive entertainment happened all around them, and FromSoft essentially said, "Not our problem." The result is that FromSoft games are terrible at being mindless entertainment. Dark Souls doesn't let you scroll TikTok while you play. Bloodborne doesn't let you treat combat like a side quest. Elden Ring doesn't care about your comfort level. These games demand engagement, cognitive, emotional, mechanical, and that demand earns respect because it assumes you want to be engaged instead of pacified. The similarities between old Bethesda and FromSoft run deeper than difficulty though. Both studios treat you with philosophical respect. Old Bethesda said, "We're not explaining everything. Read journals, follow clues, pay attention." FromSoft says, "We're not explaining everything. Read item descriptions, observe architecture, pay attention." Old Bethesda said, "You can miss content and that's fine." FromSoft says, "You can miss content and that's your fault." Old Bethesda let you wander into places above your level. FromSoft lets you wander into places above your pay grade. Old Bethesda built worlds that felt ancient and indifferent. FromSoft builds worlds that feel tragic and hostile. Different genres, different moods, same philosophy. The world exists without you, not for you. The communities look similar too. Go back to forums during the Oblivion and Fallout 3 era and you see us swapping stories instead of patch notes. I found this weird tower. I discovered this vault. I read this terminal and it ruined my mood. Compare that to Elden Ring. I found this hidden dungeon. I discovered lore that broke my brain. I jumped into a hole and now I need therapy. The cultural through-line is player-driven discovery, and you can't generate that culture in games designed around checklists and onboarding funnels. When people say they don't make games like they used to, the answer is they do. They're just not made by Bethesda anymore. They're made by FromSoftware. In the modern market, Bethesda represents the mainstream, while FromSoft represents the enthusiast. Bethesda represents mass consumption. FromSoft represents cognitive engagement. Bethesda represents onboarding. FromSoft represents mastery. The irony is that in 2025, when over 60% of people with internet access play games, the studio that behaves like it's still 2005 is the one making games about dying repeatedly to medieval abominations. FromSoftware understands something the mainstream forgot. Immersion comes from participation, not from content volume. What does this mean for RPGs going forward? If studios continue chasing the mainstream audience, we'll keep getting content libraries instead of worlds. Games that are big but not deep, curated but not mysterious, guided but not memorable. Those games will make money, but they won't create communities that last 15 years. If studios remember what immersion actually means, if they trust us to read, to explore, to fail, to think, then the genre survives. FromSoftware proves the market for that experience still exists. Elden Ring didn't sell 20 million copies because it was easy to digest. It sold 20 million because it offered something the industry had started to abandon, a world that treated you as someone worth challenging. The hopeful part of this story is that we didn't lose the feeling. The magic isn't dead, isn't gone, isn't forgotten. It just moved. It moved from Bethesda's vaults and sewers and ashlands to FromSoft's cathedrals, swamps, and dungeons. It moved from fantasy worlds that trusted you to piece together their history to dark fantasy worlds that demand you piece together their tragedy. It moved from one studio to another, the way cultural torches always do. When people say they miss old Bethesda, what they're really saying is we miss being trusted. We miss when games didn't assume we needed hand-holding, when worlds felt ancient instead of curated, when getting lost wasn't a bug, but the point. That feeling still exists. It just wears a different logo now.